Hello, I'm Sue Boyer, a former supervisor for the Knox County school system, now retired. And I'm here today in the Knox County Central Office in the Andrew Johnson to interview Edythe Mcnabb for the record at the museum. We all have a history to tell, and Edythe Mcnabb has made a significant contribution to the school system and to the boys and girls in this area. Edythe is a community leader, and she has a large hand in the operation of the Knox County Teachers Federal Credit Union, which, by the way, takes care of the bulk of the Boyer finances, as meager as they might be. Edythe, thank you for being here with us today. We'll want to ask you to tell your story, and remember, it's your story. We're all a part of history. We write it as we go, and if we're fortunate, we get to tell it our way. So today, you're going to be able to tell your story so that we can have it in the museum for those folks in the future who want to make a connection with the past. And so that will be good for both situations, for the past and for the future. I want you to be comfortable. I want you to tell your story like you want it told. Let me just start by asking a question, and then we'll take it from there. Go back to the beginning of Edythe Mcnabb, who wasn't a Mcnabb at that point, and tell us a little bit about where you were born and your early school days and all those things.
Well, thank you, Sue, and I was honored when you contacted me and asked me if I would have an interview with you, because Knox County is very dear to me. I am not a native of Knox County, but I feel as though that I have been, because I've been here since 1952 professionally. And I'm a native of Jefferson County. I lived in Jefferson County until I graduated from Carson Newman College. And then I went to the University of Tennessee for my master's degree. And I guess my experience in elementary school and in high school pushed me along a little faster, and I finished my master's at the University of Tennessee at the age of 19 and started teaching. I had not planned to teach. Teaching was not my goal. I majored in languages. I had a major in English. I had a major in Spanish. I took courses in other languages as well. And I tried to broaden my whole perspective of learning, because I was interested in being an interpreter or working with business for other countries. When I graduated from UT, I had a special teacher who was my major professor, Dr. James O. Swain. He was a great person, an outstanding educator, and he meant so much to me in my training. And I went to University of Mexico then for a summer travel program with him, because he was writing a book to be used in the elementary program in Spanish. And so I was at the University of Mexico for that period of time. And when I returned, I had a message asking me if I would go to Cock County to finish out the year. It was at Christmas time. If I would go to Cock County to finish out a school year. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I don't have any education courses. I have not taken courses in education, and I am not qualified to be a teacher. And they said, we're interested in subject matter. We're not interested in whether or not you have the qualities because we know something about your background. I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Let me give it some thought and I'll see. So I had put out some applications and so forth and knew that there was a waiting time before I would be appointed to a position as an interpreter. So I went to Cocke County, enjoyed my teaching.
Was it at the high school?
It was at the high school, Cocke County High School. And so I decided, well, this is a new career for me, maybe, so let me do some work. So I started taking night courses at the university in order to get my certification. And I did that and was so thankful that I did, because as time came along and I was making plans to pursue my career as I had originally planned, my mother had difficulty understanding why I might leave the country. And I was young and single, and I was her baby daughter. And so as a result of that, she had a heart attack. And I said, after my mother recovered from her heart problem, I said, I cannot deal with this knowing that I may have caused my mother's death. So I'm going to forget about going to Spain or wherever. I'll do that as a guest at some time. I'm going to enter education. So I finished my certification and stayed with Knox County, or stayed with Cocke County, until in 1952 I had a phone call from Mildred Doyle.
I wondered if you didn't start in Knox County under Mildred Doyle. I would have to tell you, I didn't realize this. You think you know people, but you don't really know them.
Yes.
But what an interesting background, and how fortunate for Knox County that all those things came to pass, that you decided not to go for language and to come to Knox County. Tell us a little bit about your beginning days then with Knox County.
Well, when I met her and interviewed in her office, I had heard about Mildred Doyle since I had entered education, and of course, just as being a student at the university, I knew about her background and what a great educator she was, and I was delighted and honored that she would even consider interviewing me. And when I came to her office, she asked me if I would come to Knox County to teach. And I said, well, I have started in Cocke County, and I'm enjoying Cocke County, but this is an interesting aspect. Let me think about it. And so I thought about it through the interview, and until I got out in the hall in her office, and I turned around and I said, yes, I will come to Knox County to teach. And that was the beginning of my career, and it was at the time that Gibbs High School had burned.
Oh.
And the students were attending the old Smithwood School.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was placed at Gibbs High School. And that's a great community, wonderful community, great people, wonderful students to work with. And one of my first experiences, I had not been in teaching in Knox County long, but we had a snowstorm. And I lived in the Smithwood area.
Mm-hmm.
And the buses couldn't run. I mean, it was one of those instances where the meteorologist said the snow will be away by noon, and you don't need to worry about closing school. But instead, when 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock came, the snow was deeper and deeper and deeper, and the buses couldn't run. So I said it was one of those situations where I was low on the totem pole, and so they looked at me and said, will you stay with the children until their parents pick them up until the buses run? So that was one of my early experiences that I have never forgotten, because the buses didn't all leave and the children didn't all leave till after 8 o'clock that night.
Did you stay with them?
So I stayed with them. I stayed right with them. And but my experience at Gibbs High School was just outstanding.
Who was the principal there when you started, Edythe? Now, if I hadn't asked you, you'd know.
Yes. If you hadn't asked me,
we'll come back to that.
The situation was such that I didn't teach all Spanish. I taught some English. I taught Spanish. I taught some business subjects, because when I went back to the university, along with my education courses, I also took a master's in business.
Oh.
And so I broadened my ability to reach out in other areas, and it has helped me through the years. But I remember that I was teaching a class of typing at the top of the steps whenever we moved into the Gibbs High School building. And the teachers who taught on the lower floor said that they had learned how to type because I taught by my typing. I taught them how to teach the keys by speaking the keys, and they didn't look at them. So they said, your voice carried down the steps. And we learned the keyboard.
See, Mildred Doyle knew she had a jewel in you, and she had a way of being able to seek out people that she knew would be quality and to bring them into the fold. So she got a double dose, one for the students and one for the teachers there, didn't she?
Yes, she really did, and I learned many things from Mildred Doyle. I learned how to keep your mind on your job. And I learned that personalities matter. And my philosophy throughout my teaching was if you don't know your children, you can't teach subject matter. And you teach children first, and subject matter will follow. And I learned that from my contact with her and with Mildred Patterson as well.
They were both people, were they not?
Yes, they were people, and they were professional, but they demanded accuracy, they demanded professionalism, but they did it in such a way that it became a part of your life and a part of your thoughts, not belligerent. And so after I had taught at Gibbs High School for about 8 years, Miss Doyle asked me if I would come to the central office and work as Director of Publications and Supervisor of Modern Foreign Languages. And some of my best experiences at Gibbs High School were the students with whom I worked as supervisor of the news media, the newspaper that they had at the school, and the experiences in taking them on trips to conventions, and it was just a great experience to work with people who had talent, students who had talents that were looking for careers. And I might say that one of my very special students that I had at Gibbs High School was Rory Mullins.
Really?
And someone asked me recently if I knew Rory Mullins well enough to talk with him about a situation that they had met with in the schools. And I said, well, it just depends on what you say and what your need is. I said, I date back to Rory Mullins as a student.
And I did not realize that, Edythe.
Yes.
That's most interesting.
Yes, he was a member of the paper staff as well.
Okay.
And he went on different programs with me. I recall, as I hear teachers now talk about taking students on field trips and the experiences they have and so forth, I took the entire paper staff to Nashville 2 or 3 different times.
Wow.
As the only chaperone, 10 and 15 people. And I took them to Memphis, and I made arrangements with the railroad when I took them to Memphis to have a private car for the students. And there were also some students at Fulton High School who wanted to go to that convention, and they were not able to go because their sponsor didn't feel that she could do it at that time, and so they contacted me and asked me. So I took 5 students from Fulton High School along with mine, and we just had a ball for 4 days in Memphis and saw several things. And so many of the students remember those kinds of things, and they meet me now. And the joy about teaching and the experience that I had with students, you see them everywhere. You see them everywhere. And they're always so pleasant and so joyful. And I remember at one time I was being wheeled into the operating room at St. Mary's Hospital. And you know how they have you, you're not right sure what you're doing and what you're saying, but just as they roll me in, I had my students, when they would meet me in the hallway, I wanted them to use their Spanish, and I would say, you speak to people by saying hola, which is hello in Spanish. And so as they roll me in, this voice from the back said, hola. So I looked up at the people who were there with me, and I said, you know, I think I want you to take me back to my room. Because that hola came from one of my students. So that was an interesting experience. But I see them in many different locations, and I've seen them be successful in their careers. And that is the joy of teaching, is to see people that you have worked with and help them to mold their lives, and maybe in some way you influence them to be the success that they are in business.
Well, now you do know, Edythe, that there is a need for Spanish teachers even today. So if you get a call, just be ready for doing some teaching in Spanish.
Well,
you didn't realize when you were first started teaching Spanish that there would be a demand one day for Spanish teachers.
No, I did not realize that it was going to be as that the need would increase. And when I retired, I had several opportunities to continue, and I said, thank you, but I have spent 40 years in education. I now want to pursue some other things that I could not do when I was in education, because I had a time restraint with my career, and teaching school is not an 8 to 4
No.
job. It starts at 6:30 in the morning and it goes until whatever hour you are needed to do whatever you need to do.
It's really pretty close to an around-the-clock, around-the-year profession, is it
Yes.
not? Well, now, you mentioned the influence, and I know you had great influences on your students. And you've mentioned Miss Patterson and Miss Doyle. Who were some other folks that helped you along the way, or that you looked up to, or that were your mentors when you were in education? Were there others?
Max Clendenin was a principal of Gibbs during the time that I was there, and he was a great educator. He was a people person, and I learned a lot from working with him.
He was an icon in the community as well, was he not?
Yes, he was an icon in the community. And another person that influenced my early experience in teaching was Trula Bricky. Her husband was formerly a superintendent of Knox County and schools, but she was librarian and at Gibbs, and then whenever I came into the central office, I worked with several different people in Spanish, in languages. I initiated with Marie Compere, whom you may have heard. She was an individual who lived in West Knoxville. She was interested in, she was from Mexico. She was interested in the teaching young children to speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. And she was the first volunteer elementary school teacher that we had, and I initiated the elementary program in Knox County. And it was a great experience, and when I left the central office in 1966 because I was expecting a child, and my son was born in 1966, and when I went, I stayed with him for a while, 2 years, and then whenever I was ready to go back into education, and I still worked with education during those 2 years, but not
full time.
Not full time. And I asked Miss Doyle to please place me as a Spanish teacher in one of the schools nearby my residence. I live in Halls Crossroads, and I wanted to teach in that area, and so she placed me at Halls High School, and I continued at Halls High School until I retired.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Edythe. Now we know that research says that students learn a foreign language better the younger they are.
Yes.
So you had the foresight then to begin something that research has proven now, and it may have then, I don't know, but that's really where we need to start with foreign languages.
Yes.
So you've had a really, really wonderful career.
I really have.
Now,
I have enjoyed it thoroughly.
Now let's change gears just a little bit. It still has to do with education, but I know you were instrumental, at least you know about the beginnings of the Knox County Federal Teachers Credit Union. Tell us a little bit about how it started and your part in it and what's going on today.
Well, C.B. Chesney, who lived in the Carnes community and was a principal of Carnes High School and was a supervisor in the Knox County schools in the position that at the time he started was called truant officer.
Oh, okay. I remember those days now.
Yes, and he was a lovely person, very knowledgeable, and he was president of the Knox County Education Association and attended a national convention in Oregon. And at that time, he was introduced to the credit union, the National
Oh,
Credit Union Association. And he came back to Knox County enthusiastic about, he said, this is something that we need in Knox County. He talked with Miss Doyle about it, and she became enthusiastic about it and was interested in it. And so he talked with me about it and asked me if I would help him organize a credit union for Knox County. And so with the help of several people, in 1956, he had a meeting of the people who attended the Knox County Education Association meeting at Young High School at that time, and to meet following the regular meeting and discuss a credit union. So that was the beginning of the credit union that we started in 1956.
okay. Now, where was it located? The actual once it was started, where would you go to the credit union at that time?
Well, Mr. Chesney was located at the central office.
Mm-hmm.
The treasurer, who was really the key person in the credit union, was R.E. Hendricks, who was principal of Holston.
Yes, and former principal of Carter High School,
Yes.
and my principal when I was in high school.
Is that right?
Is that not a small world?
Yes.
Now go ahead with that.
And so he was the person that took it until annexation. He was
Okay.
the treasurer and was in charge of the credit union. And if they needed to make loans or if they were going to become a member or whatever, they contacted him.
Okay.
And he managed it from that point. But it was in 1962 that annexation really became a problem, and we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And I was not a member of the original board for the Knox County Credit Union, because there were other people who had more experience and more contact with the people in the schools, and I felt that was important. And I was elected to the board in 1960, and that was 4 years after it originally started. And I was made secretary. I was voted in as secretary at the time I was voted into the board, and I have continued as secretary. I'm executive secretary and treasurer at this time. So I have been with the credit union as a board member since 1960.
Oh, that is great. That is great. And now there are how many offices for the credit union?
Well, we have, the main office is located in Halls Crossroads. We have an office at Cedar Springs. We have just recently moved. We were on Gallagher View Road until this year, and we have just bought a location. It's the kiosk in the Cedar Springs Shopping Center. We bought that used to be the Tennessee Teachers Credit Union, and they moved to Farragut. And when they moved to Farragut, then we bought their location in the Cedar Springs. And we have that one, and then we have bought a location in South Knoxville.
Okay.
And we will be opening it. We bought an old Regions Bank building, and it's on Chapman Highway, and we are in the process of making final arrangements to move in. We will be in the building within the month.
Great. That is great.
So we started with $123, and
You've done well, Edythe. You've done well.
I said it's really interesting. We started with $123. We had 23 members to begin with. We now have 3,230 members. And our assets after our first meeting was the $123, and we are now $23 million.
Wow.
So we have served many, many people, and we had some rough time along the way because with the problem of annexation, we lost 45% of our membership.
Right. Several schools.
Because those people who were not teaching in Knox County, our charter said employees of Knox County. And so the employees of Knox County diminished considerably because there were 28 schools that were annexed. So we lost all the members from those schools, and a third of the total membership was not teaching in Knox County of the credit union. And a large percentage of the shares were owned by those people who had been annexed.
Did make problems then for the
Yes.
security of the
As
system.
well as many of the loans that had been a part of the credit union were also within that annex group. So that was when I became treasurer of the credit union. Miss Doyle again asked me when Mr. Hendricks could no longer be treasurer because he was annexed.
Right.
If I would consider being treasurer. And I said, I need to think about this. I'm secretary and I have done that, but I have my job here, and I think that there are other people who can do this, and let me think about it. So a week went by, and those who knew Miss Doyle well knew that she had some characteristics that would let you know that business was serious. And one of them was whenever she would take her finger and run it through her hair, you straightened up and you listened. But another one was the use of green ink. And whenever you had a message from her in green ink, you read it twice. So I went in one morning, and on my desk was a box and a message in green ink. The board has determined that you will be treasurer of the Knox County Teachers Federal Credit Union. So my office was upstairs, and I went downstairs and I said, "Yes, ma'am, Miss Doyle, when do I
I would
take
suspect
over?"
that you might have seen the redness from her neck up.
Yes.
If you had not complied as you should have, because that was another one of her landmarks, was
Yes.
when her neck got red.
That's
that
right.
really was one of them. But you knew it was time to say yes.
Yes, I knew it was time to say yes. So I said yes, and from that time, then I worked it into my regular work. And then when I left the office in 1966, I went to her office and I said, "Now I'm going to be on leave for a while, and I think that the board needs to find someone else to be treasurer of the credit union." And she said, "I think that when you took this office, you said, I'll think about it for a while." she says, I'm going to turn this right back to you. I'm going to think about this for a while. And so within the day, she came back and she said, would you consider taking this home with you? And I said, well, let me discuss this with my husband and see how we feel about having the credit union in our home. So we discussed it, and so we decided. So I had some space in my basement, so I converted that space into the credit union office. And I managed the credit union at that point. It was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job, because if someone had a need for service at any time, I took care of them because I was at home, and so it wasn't long after that until we needed to hire another person, and we hired Dolly Leach. She was a resident of the Halls community, very capable individual, very solid, and she came to my house and worked as manager of the credit union whenever I went back to teaching. And she stayed with the credit union until she retired 4 or 5 years ago, and made an outstanding contribution to the credit union because she too was a people person.
Well, and one of the I guess outstanding things about Mildred Doyle was she was a tenacious individual.
Yes.
You could say that.
Yes.
And one thing about it, her being tenacious is partly the reason that the credit union, the hard work of others, of course, part of the reason that the credit union is what it is today.
Well, indeed it was, because she supported it from the very beginning. And she was a member of the first board, and she saw that we had access to the schools. She made it very clear to the teachers through the Knox County Education Association that the credit union was a part of the school service, and if we had a need for a space to have meetings, she provided it for us. And she was an outstanding supporter of the credit union, and it would not have been what it is today had we not had the support that she gave us.
Now, do you have a large board now, Edythe? And could you just tell us some of the people, you might not be able to get all of them, people that are on the board at this time?
Yes, we have seven board members.
Mm-hmm.
John R. McLeod, who is now retired, but he's a former principal, is a member of the board, and he's been a member of the board since 1973. Roger Underwood, who is now, he is in the central office at the schools, mm-hmm. Knox County Schools. He is chairman of the finance committee of the credit union and is an outstanding board member. We have Bob Huff is president of the credit union at this time, and he was a former principal of Mount Olive School, and is retired. Jim Bellamy was president. We have had, actually, during the life of the credit union, we started with Mr. Hendricks as Secretary Treasurer and C.B. Chesney as president. When Mr. Chesney retired, Don Steiner, who I'm sure you know because he's a Carter individual, was president of the credit union and was an outstanding person and had the unfortune of having an early death. But those individuals, then James Bellamy became president, and he he had been a principal and on the central office staff as well. When at the time of his death, then Bob Huff, who had been serving as vice president, became the president. Roy Mullins, who has been a member of the board since the early 70s, is vice president of the credit union at this time and is a member of the board. Janice Walker, who was principal of Gibbs High School, and who was formerly, before she became principal, a math teacher and had a background in finances.
Is she retired, Edythe?
Yes, she's retired and is a member of the board.
Okay.
She retired 2 years ago. Mike Asquith, who was an assistant principal at Gibbs and has taught in Knox County and is a member of the board. And that is the current board that we have.
Well, that's great. That's an interesting story of the credit union, and one that I did not know. Like I say, that the credit union manages the bulk of the small finances that the Boyer household has, and so we're glad they're there. But you have really made a contribution, and a significant contribution, to education in Knox County, and to the boys and girls and the people that you've come in contact with, Edythe. It's significant, and other people need to know this story because, like I say, we all have a story to tell. So it's an honor for me to be here today to talk and have a conversation with Edythe Mcnabb and to learn some things I did not know about Knox County. But we thank you for taking your time to be with us and to help to preserve the history of education in this area, because we don't want this history to get away from us and people not be able to remember names of some of the folks that you've talked about, because we are all part of history in the making. And I'm hoping as people listen to this conversation that will be at the Knox County Education Museum over at the Fifth Avenue building, that they will see that there are some wonderful things that came out of the past that will help to make the future better. Thank you for being with us, Edythe.
But thank you for inviting me to interview with you, and any contribution that I have made to the credit union or to education in Knox County has been because someone in Knox County was a mentor to me, and it takes many, many people to make any project successful, and a lot of people have made a lot of contribution in the part that I have played as a teacher, as a supervisor, and as a part of the credit union.
Thank you.
Thank you.